This podcast is an expression of the personal views and opinions of the hosts and guests, and they do not represent the official stance of the podcast, its sponsors, or affiliated organizations. The podcast may cover topics such as drugs, mental illness, politics, and religion, which can be controversial or sensitive. The podcast does not support any illegal activities and advises listeners to seek help from appropriate professionals for any personal concerns related to these topics. The information provided in the podcast is for general informational purposes only, and it is not a substitute for professional advice. Listeners are urged to consult with a qualified healthcare professional for any questions regarding their mental or physical health. The podcast and its creators are not responsible for any loss or harm resulting from the use or reliance on the information provided in the podcast.
Recording.
Turn my mic up.
Let's get it on.
What's going on, Steet Stoics, and welcome back to the Steet Stoics podcast, hosted by Jay, Mike, and Nate. In the last episode, we dived into the topic of judgment and explored ways to overcome our natural tendency to judge others and ourselves. Today, we're shifting our focus to the power of journaling and mindfulness. In this episode, we'll explore how the simple act of putting pen to paper and cultivating mindfulness can help us better understand ourselves, reduce stress, and improve our overall well-being. So guys, tonight I'm going to open it up with a quote from Marcus Aurelius. Don't fill your mind with all the bad things that might still happen. Stay focused on the present situation. I felt that that quote was pretty fitting, basically, for the trend of what we've been talking about on the previous episodes and for our topic this week, journaling and mindfulness. Guys, how often do you guys get asked how to stay present in the moment?
Daily.
Mike, you said daily.
Yeah,
What's up?
I mean, just at work. Yeah, just at work. You know, we, that's what we do is we teach people how to be in the moment and how to deal with the crisis that's at hand, you know?
Right.
And so that's the basis of our curriculum that we teach at work. So every day we teach people how to stay in that moment.
Like from our experience, and Jay, even though you might not get asked that a lot, like at least when you and I work together, it's something that we have to do, right? Like and I imagine you still do it, and you probably benefited from the last job learning how to do those things better. So like now employing it in your new job, you're probably a heck of a lot better at freaking overcoming those obstacles, right?
Yeah, I think from what I've learned as far as my experience and some of the stuff that I've had to do in the past, I think it's helped me out where probably I am present, and I feel like that's kind of where I live now, especially these days. But it's all because of those experiences, right? Where I had to learn that I needed to be present in order to function in this particular role or job that I was doing. And so at this point, no one has to tell me or ask me, to be present, because I feel like at this point, that's what I am doing. I'm always doing that. I always try to make sure that enjoy the moment now, like what it is to live today. That's what I do now. I don't wait for somebody to tell me to, or ask me if, what that is, or am I doing it? I am.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And, I was pretty excited when we chose this topic because I think all of us have our own unique and different approach to these things, and I think that's going to be fun to explore with each other and with our community. And speaking of the community, in our community Discord, we had somebody ask us like, how do you focus on XYZ? And it was a couple of different people, well, more than a couple, but we'll just talk about a couple of different people and in a few different ways. uh, Different things about Stoicism. How do you guys think about memento mori throughout your day? And how do you guys think about this? And how do you control your thoughts and all these different things? And when we respond to those things, you have to be empathetic in your approach, and it's like structured these different ways. And if we try to solve a problem for somebody, it's not going to be the same, right? So um, getting those people to think about it on their own. This episode, our community members, our listeners, whoever is viewing our content, you're going to see some of those suggestions now. Now we have a platform to talk about all of those things, and we have a lot more time to do it. Once this is out there, though, if those who are reaching out to us for these answers, expand on it further. Hey, when you talked about this, what did that look like? Because when you talk about things like how do you think about memento mori all the time, it seems like it's kind of specific, but really it's kind of broad, and it's like you have to think about each different moment as its own. And so through mindfulness and journaling, that's a tool to be able to stay present. So let's see here. Jay, would you say that you're more the mindfulness type, journaling type, or both? Like what do you do?
I would say I lean more towards being mindful. I definitely have plans, have started, have been doing a very poor job of keeping up with journaling, but I do understand the the impact and the positivity that comes from being able to put pen to paper and be able to just let all of those thoughts flow into words on a piece of paper. Journaling is something, when I have done it in the past, I feel like certain words come out of me that I don't even some when I read it, I even look down at the piece of paper and I said, where did this come from? Like, those are the deepest thoughts that I'm able to pull out that I don't think sometimes I'm able to voice them, to be able to put them into a structured sentence and make them sound exactly like how I thought of them. And I think when it comes to journaling, I'm able to do stuff like that. I just really am not happy with the fact that I'm not able to discipline myself to do it daily as I would like to do it, because I would like to do something like that, because I think that a lot of creativity comes out of that as well. Like, just being able to just express whatever thoughts you got going on. And it could be the most random things. It doesn't even have to be about like what's happening daily to me. It's sometimes, I'll jot like just general things about life, and how I view things, and just um, random things. And sometimes it could just be a list of things that I want to do, a to-do list. And, you know,
Right.
that also helps with, like, especially if you're trying to stay on top of things. Um, Journaling, and that is something that I kind of have been doing, but for work, which now that I have been doing it more often for work, which is I notate everything I do, and and just kind of separate times of when I'm doing it. That's helping me now structure
Hmm.
myself for work and be able to set myself for some goals and be able to accomplish them by the end of the day or the end of the week. So I know that the formula works. Now I just have to apply it to my daily life, because I have a lot of things that I definitely feel like it's a growing list of things that, because of everything that I got going on right now with me, I forget. I just have a
Right.
real bad habit of not accomplishing a lot of the things that I have set for myself, or that I've been telling myself, like, oh, I got to get around to doing it, because I know that if I were to plan things out with journaling or just kind of doing a to-do list, it would improve things. So to focus now on the mindfulness thing, right? Like
Hey, Jay,
like what I
could I
was just
pause
saying,
you for
right?
2 seconds? But
Yeah.
before you get into mindfulness, I got something that popped in my head when you were talking about journaling. So at work, you said you break it down uh, kind of by time, right?
I kind of get where you're gonna come from with this, but let me just beat you to that.
Yeah.
So yes, the type of work that me and you used to do at that contract got me into that habit that has continued to be
Oh,
implemented at a lot of the other jobs that I've done, where it's pretty much anything that happens, anything that I do as far as work, I write it down. I have in the past implemented it in some of the jobs, but then I just don't do it. So, like with this job that I have now, I hadn't really been doing it. Now it's being asked of me. And so naturally, I was like, okay, I know what this is like. So it helps a lot, because now I'm able to kind of plan things out and be able to set times for certain projects that I need to accomplish or finish by certain time frames. So it
right,
helps, and I know that if I do that and I apply that to my actual daily life, that I will be able to get certain things that I have accomplished. Like, if you kind of see back here, this
yeah.
table has not been used for a couple of weeks now.
Uh-oh.
So that's one of the things that I want to be able to sit down and be able to do some work back there, because I just I have all these other things that I have going on too around here. So I think
Right.
as long as I set it somehow into a schedule, then boom, it'll happen.
So I'm glad you brought it there because I wasn't even thinking about that. And that, dude, that actually helps make a lot of sense to something that I do. What I was actually going to get into was I was going to relate it for people who are interested in journaling, time block scheduling. And so you could do that many different ways: hourly, every 2 hours, every 3 hours, every 4 hours, every 30 minutes, whatever. I'm a 30-minute guy, obviously. And now that Jay tried to beat me to the punch, it makes sense why I'm a 30-minute guy, is because for 10 years, that's how I kept my personal journal for a specific role that I played in society. So that's pretty funny. I like that. All right, sorry to kind of back you up there, Jay, but you were talking about
It's all good.
mindfulness because you're more a mindfulness guy.
Right. So obviously, if you guys have heard episode one and know my little journey into all of this and where I'm at now in life since then, it's like a weird switch, right? How my perception of things is and how my thought processes are when it comes to certain things, of viewing people around me and things that are happening outside and around me, right? And what I have control of and what I don't. Um, there have been moments where I've had to just have that experience of, like, just kind of in awe of just being present and just knowing that I'm in the present right now, and just thinking about, wow, this is a weird feeling right now, that I'm focused right now on the present, because that's not who I was. I was too caught up in shit from the future about planning stuff, and I'm the ultimate planner. If I could plan something, I would. And I would try to plan it to the T. And it never worked. I mean, stuff happens in life. And the problem was that I would beat myself up for shit not coming out the way that I wanted to. So obviously now I've learned that that doesn't really matter. that I don't need to be that type of person because I need to live in the moment, and just whatever the moment brings is what you have to enjoy. What you're experiencing now is already awesome because you're living in an experience that not a lot of people are probably getting to do. It's from like the most minimal things, like let's say taking a drive down the street to go to a park with your kids and just having that moment that you know that they're going to share with you and be able to reflect on later on and remind you of, like, oh, remember when you used to take us here? Or, you know, just just the regular like house visit that you might do to like a friend or a family member. It's just, you don't know if you'll ever get that back. So
Right.
especially for me now with like all the stoicism stuff, I think one of the things that really kind of like made it stick and made it um be a thing that I always now reflect on is memento mori. Like,
Mm-hmm.
to me, that is something that is constantly on my mind, constantly, where I am always aware, and it puts me in a perspective of being present when I think about death, when I think about just the thought that at any moment death can come and can take me away, and that's it. So what
Mm.
was it that I lived prior to that? And am I going to be regretful? Am I going to be happy? Am I going to be sad about the fact that I have been taken away and I didn't get to experience, a good life or be able to live in the moment or the present moment? So to me, those are the things that now constantly like come up, right? Death, about enjoying now, about making sure that um, that I treat life like that. It actually reminds me of a Seneca quote that I can pull up here. The quote is, "Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day. The one who puts the finishing touches on their life each day is never short of time." Which is funny because it kind of also, when there's the mention of books here, it's kind of like journaling, so it kind of plays into it too, where I reflect on that, right? Like, I think about that. I live life as if it could be my last day. So I don't try to get too hung up on things. I don't focus too much about you know what could possibly happen. I mean, I still plan things out in the future, like things that I would like to do, but I don't get too caught up in it has to happen like this, and this is what needs to happen, or no, if we have this set, then it's set, then we can't push anything back. To me, I'm very fluid now. I could just, if another plan comes up and I can already see that the other one's not going to work, then I'll push it away. I don't worry about it no more. I'm not too hung up or stressed about the fact that, oh shit, I didn't get to do it. It is what it is. That's kind of how I feel about living in the present. It is what it is, and you go through life, and you live in the present and deal with whatever it is that life throws at you, and just keep pushing forward. So yeah, don't postpone nothing, because you never know. That's kind of why I always harp on people about, don't leave it for life, don't leave it for tomorrow, don't keep pushing it back, because when exactly is tomorrow when you're going to have the time for that? Because a lot of times I hear, oh, when I have time, or and people, I've known people that have been saying that for years, and it's like, you're not getting any younger, time is not going to slow down. And yeah, so you're you're now, occupying your time with other things, so you're not going to do it unless you force yourself to do it and find the discipline. That's what you need to do. Set yourself up for to be, disciplined on things like that, to do these things. Don't postpone them. If you have really care about these goals of yours that you might be setting for yourself, then do them. Jump in there,
Yep.
do them. That's what we've been doing. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm in the middle of all of this with Nate and with Mike. We're here. This is our first episode recording now with video on it, and it's a little uncomfortable, but fuck it. Fuck it. Let's go.
Right. Yeah, you know, Jay, while you were saying that too, I was dude, so like as you guys know, quotes are like in my mind, and I tend to hear or read these things and they resonate, and I just like eat them up. And oftentimes when I speak about them, you know, like I'm like, hey, I'm just paraphrasing because I don't want to ruin the quote. That's how passionate I am about them. But it made me think of a quote, and I had to look it up just so I couldn't get it wrong. And that was a quote from Marcus Aurelius that says, "Stop whatever you are doing for a moment and ask yourself, am I afraid of death because I won't be able to do this anymore?" And how I take that is like doing this task, this whatever you are doing in the present moment. Stop. And are you scared of death because this is the thing you can't do? If the answer is no, then stop fucking doing it. You know what I mean? Because if the answer is yes, keep doing it. Right? Because that means you're passionate about it. That means like this means something to you. And what I'm hearing you say, Jay, is like, you know, you used to plan all these things and you used to work on all these different things, but like some of them I'm hearing like they weren't important. They were like non-factor stuff. And then now with your mindfulness, you're able to focus on the things that are important, right?
Yep. That's
Yeah.
exactly what's happening.
Damn, that's solid. I love it. Man. All right. Mike, would you say you're more of a mindfulness guy or a journaling guy?
I would have to say I'm more of a mindfulness guy, with a desire to be a journaling guy. So
Yeah, I
to be
think that's a
both.
popular choice, huh?
And you know that's that
You know?
right. uh, you know, and that's something that I'm actively practicing, trying uh, to get better at, is doing the journaling and not just the mindfulness. Um, I know some recently this past year, my one of my best friends committed suicide,
Damn.
and the chaplain for the county police department came over, and something that he said really struck a chord with me, and it was, you have to take each second by second and being in that moment, um, in order to get past whatever you're getting past, right? In that instance, it was my friend's death,
Right.
right? And so that was that's something that I've tried to apply since then, um, is just taking it second by second, and through for the and that's a big reason why I'm mainly a mindfulness guy right now, is just uh, because I actively have to practice being in the moment and being mindful uh, of what's happening around me. Um, and also part of that assessment that I'm doing second by second is how can I improve for that next second.
Right.
So journaling is that next step for me, and so um, I have a stack on our dining room table of books about that high that I read, and I read quotes out of. Um, I'm reading meditations right now, page word by word, and I have 3 journals that I write in, that I'm starting to write in. So just definitely adding that to my every second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that we all three have this different approach to it. And it's nice because I get to hear these different perspectives and then try to apply the same thing to myself. Although, like, the whole time I'm thinking, like, we're all overly critical of ourselves. And I'm thinking, like, man, I need to do a little bit more of that. Oh man, now Mike's talking. I should do more of that too. Like, dang, that's really good insight. Dang, yeah,
Yeah, I got kind of the same thing going on that Mike has,
Yeah.
where I have multiple books laid around this whole apartment, but
yeah,
yeah, they just sit there. I mean, I go outside in the balcony and I see it. I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm about to start writing in there. Yeah, I just get lost in other things,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. I've got so many books.
yep.
Yeah. My wife just actually bought a bookshelf to keep all the books that I got.
Oh man,
So Amazon used marketplace
yeah,
is a good thing.
without a doubt, without a doubt.
And just for the record, the Amazon isn't
Yeah,
sponsoring us.
if they want to, though, hit us up. You know what I mean? Oh man,
Hmm.
that's great.
Yeah, right.
Gotta aim high.
Aim high, aim high. All right.
What up, listeners? We wanted to take a moment and express our gratitude for your support and for taking the time to tune into our podcast. We value your feedback and recommendations, and we'd love to hear your stories about how Stoicism or any other self-improvement practice has impacted your journey. Please send your stories or any info you'd like to share with us to thestreetstoics@gmail.com. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at The Street Stoics to stay connected and receive latest updates. If you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing with others. Thank you again for being part of our community.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I man, I was trying to think about like how I'm going to jump into this cuz just talking with you guys either at work or just off the podcast whatever. I kind of knew you guys were both going to go into this mindfulness thing, and I was trying to recall before a certain a certain trigger in my life if I was a mindfulness guy, because I know for a fact I wasn't a journaling type of guy back then, and I can't recall. I don't remember, which I don't know, kind of saddens me in the moment, but it is what it is. So, yeah, like I know you guys are mindfulness guys, but I am definitely a journaling guy. Um, I tried to practice mindfulness when I first started getting into Stoicism, and I downloaded these apps, and I'll still use a little mindfulness app here and there for like trying to help get to sleep. Um, Basically because I'm into like physical fitness and trying to get myself healthier because of the lung disease and stuff. So sleep's very important to me. I know I don't get like the 8 hours or whatever people recommend. For whatever reason, even though I see a bunch of specialists, I still don't believe in that. I feel like, right.
Who
Not
does?
I
me.
feel like for me, like my premium range is between 5.5 to 7.5 hours, and 7.5 even sometimes I'm like, yeah, you're saying 6 there, Jay. I mean, dude, 7.5. Sometimes I wake up and I feel groggy, and next thing you know, like 2 hours after waking up, I'm like, I
I
need to go back to sleep.
I slept 8 hours today, and my back hurts. And my back doesn't
Mhm.
normally hurt when I sleep 6.
Yeah. There might be something to that. I remember reading
Yeah,
about
so too much
one
sleep is
of the
bad for me
Stoics.
now.
Yeah. I remember one of the Stoics
Yeah.
saying something about sleep on a uncomfortable surface because you shouldn't be sleeping most of your life. I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember who said it or what actually was said, but that's kind of funny. Man, I think that means we're getting old.
Yeah,
Anyways.
that's exactly what that means.
I think that's exactly what that means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got pains that I don't even know could exist.
Too tired to stay up and too old to fall asleep.
That's a good one. That's
Oh,
a good one.
yep. Yep. So, jumping back into it, journaling. Like, so I tried this mindfulness stuff, and it is what it is. I think, in a way, I use journaling as my mindfulness. It's kind of like a double-sided dagger in a way, right? Like you got journaling on one side, and the way I journal prompts mindfulness throughout the day because I journal both in the morning when I wake and in the evening. And so, you know, on one of the other episodes, I already talked about my little dealing with death and the lung disease stuff, right? And it wasn't. I mean, that was like a cataclysm for me. Like, I already was kind of an anxious feller, you know, and hearing that kind of made me a little bit more anxious. Like, it's an interesting thing, right? But it wasn't until I had kids, because once I got diagnosed with a disease, I told myself I wasn't going to have kids. And then I did it anyways. I didn't listen to myself. And now that I have them, it's like things are even more important to me, like the little things, life and being present. And now it's, you know, like if it was just me, who knows if I'd still be trying to get healthy and try to stay alive a little bit longer. But now it's like I have to. And I don't recall if I talked about this in another episode or not, but for journaling, I am not a journaler. Okay. Like, let's just put that out there. I am because I do it all the time, but deep down, I wasn't. In the beginning, I thought journaling was a girl's thing. And I know that might sound misogynistic or sexist, things like that. Back in the 90s, before what I knew what those terms were, that's just kind of how the culture was. And so I think there's still a little bit of that in my mind, even though I'm very open to these new ideas. And so it was a barrier for me to get into journaling until I started looking into it. And, you know, things like getting the leadership positions and all those different things, I found out that for a long time, the greatest leaders, male, female, didn't matter. They were journaling. And that was to stay focused on the present moment and to be a better people. And so that's what I started doing. I really didn't know how to start journaling. I was like, do I just open up a spiral notebook and jot down some stuff? Like, what am I going to write? I don't even have anything to write about. My life is boring. So what I did was I did a bunch of research and I was like, how did the Stoics journal? And basically I came up with some prompts because I really don't like writing. And I was like, because of that mindset and because of that feeling, I need to start doing it more, like challenge myself. You'd like, oh, guy, you don't think you like writing? Well, let's start freaking writing all the time. And then I ran into some time constraints. So first it started off with like, I started doing these time block schedulings for myself so that way I could start to get more accomplished throughout my day, because I knew that time is the most precious resource asset in this thing we call life. And so I started doing that and I broke it down by half hour. And we already talked about it earlier. It's probably because of my last job. And I started getting stuff done and I started seeing that success, and that success gained momentum. And I was like, okay, well, now I need to start applying what I've learned about journaling. So I have these little, almost like index cards size, and it's just numbered, a few prompts. And then in my journal, I put the date, I put the number, and I put my response to it. And that way it's timely, it's efficient, and I can, no matter how I'm feeling that day, still answer those questions or those prompts. And primarily in the morning, it's a bunch of preparatory, like mindset stuff. Like, who do you want to be? Envision your perfect life. And I read some Stoic reflection stuff, so that way it's like, okay, I can answer those questions a little bit better. And I end the prompt for the morning session with a task list. So, what are the 5 tasks I want to focus my time on today? And I write those down. And that's prompting my mindset to think about those things as I move throughout the day. And I can either look back at it, or because I've been doing it for a while, those prompts stick in my mind and I try to get those things done. And if I don't get, like, it's a larger task, I take one small step towards it a day. Then I go throughout my day, and I'm human just as everyone else is. Even with this urge and anxiety that I have to use my time as efficiently as possible, I still have hangups. I still have bad days, and I still have good days. Like when we talked about Rudyard Kipling's poem, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. I haven't journaled the last 2 days. And I told myself I'm just take a little break. And I was like, man, my inner monologue with myself is like, stop being a little bitch. You don't need a break. And I think I do need a break. I think I need to take a little bit easier on myself, because one of the things that I found is when I'm having a shit day, when I'm having a terrible day, I get home and I'm like, fucking, I got a journal. And I rip that thing out and I flip the page open and I start writing in it. And I'm like, this is stupid. Yeah, it was a terrible day. No response. That's dumb. And then I read it the next day when, time is the best, delay is the best thing for anger, right? And I'm like, dude, are you kidding me? That was a terrible day. You needed to write this, this, and this down. And I'm like, oh shit. So then I write them down the next day. And that's okay too. There's some stressful times in my life when it was so overwhelming mentally and physically that I couldn't even think about picking up the journal. But later I did. Later, when I was refreshed, recuperated, I re-engaged and I wrote those things down in the journal. And I'm thankful to myself for doing it, even though it was late and in the moment. I call myself the little bitch or whatever. It was important to me that I got to it later, because when you deal with hard shit, sometimes, and this is going to sound silly to some people and other people it's going to make a lot of sense, but you got to talk about it. And that could be, for me, like, I'll just talk about it from my standpoint. For me, I don't like to talk about my problems. I feel like everybody has their problems and I don't want to become another burden to them. And it's not until I get them finally down in a journal and I review them that I'm like, all right, I'm going to start doing this. And it causes me to think about it. And it's painful, right? And because we're looking to make progress, we're looking to move forward. It's painful because we are both the sculptor and the marble. We are the painting and the paintbrush. We are our own work of art, and it's painful. But being able to talk about whatever it was at some point, first to myself and then to somebody else, like, we have this podcast with Mike and Jay, so I might come to these guys and let this thing off my chest because it's been eating at me. That's an important part of me making progress and staying focused on the present moment. The other side to that is, so like these guys got a bunch of books and you guys talked about it. I actually have multiple journals. So I have a spiral notebook that's just lined, it's college ruled or whatever. And I write the date, I do my morning sesh, I do my evening sesh, and I close it. I got a little, bookmark, and then boom. And then I pull out this actually, I think I bought it offline or something. It's basically like a mindfulness journal, but it's heavy on the um, what do you call that? Habit tracking. So you start to develop your goals. It takes you through SMART goals, and anybody can Google SMART goals. You develop those things, and then you start making a list in the morning. It also has a morning and an afternoon thing, or morning and evening rather. And in the morning, you put your morning routine. If you're going to practice acts of altruism, nurture key relationships, go out of your comfort zone, what's your primary task, all these different things. And then in the evening, you reflect on those. What was a hard thing to do today? And that one, it actually makes it a little bit easier to respond when you're having a good or a bad day. And I feel like I need to shed a little bit of light on the good and the bad day thing before we get too far. So if I'm having I already talked about, if I'm having a bad day, everybody can relate. It's hard to do those little minute tasks, right? It's also the same for me when I come out on top. So for a long time, I would say probably about a year or maybe 6 months to a year, I stopped journaling completely. And I felt the anxiety creeping in. I would get these panic attacks, and it was almost like I couldn't breathe. And I was like, man, I need to start journaling and focusing on the present, focusing on my goals. And so I started doing that. It was actually before we started doing this podcast. And it wasn't until recently when I started taking more breaks from the journaling that the anxiety started creeping back in. So currently, the last, I would say, week, I have a rough time sleeping throughout the night. Basically, I'll go to sleep and everything's fine. And it doesn't matter, hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours into my sleep, I wake up just sweating, just drenched in sweat, and I'm screaming because my anxiety is about death. I think that's a little bit obvious based on some of the stories I've told. And it's like I have these grips in on reality and how temporary it is. And I was trying to think, why have I stopped journaling? And it's because when I was journaling, I started working out. I started getting enough water. I started getting good sleep. I started controlling my mindset. And it doesn't matter where you work, there's drama. There was some drama at work, and I was still able to pull off this good mindset. And I didn't see that I was on top of the mountain. I met triumph, right? And when you're on the top, when you're at the pinnacle, it's hard to look back or even to look forward because it's so overwhelmingly good that you forget where you're at. And I forgot where I was at, and that's what made me fall past baseline. So I basically I need to pick myself back up and keep walking. But yeah, journaling, that's where I see it. We get a lot of questions about, Mike talked about it at work, like how do you stay present in the moment? How do you do this and that? On the community, some people like, how do you think about these things? For me, if it weren't for journaling, I wouldn't be doing it. I'd come up with something else to do, or I'd come up with nothing to do. We've all sit and binge watched, something on Netflix or Hulu or HBO Max, or all these different streaming services are out here, right? And it's easy to do, especially when we're not focused on getting tasks done. So journaling is how I keep myself honest.
I got something to add to that. So yeah, some notes that I wrote down here. Tried to go back kind of in my mind as far as history and when I've done journaling in the past, and trying to remember if I even did it as a kid. No, I don't recall actually doing stuff like that. If anything, when I was a teenager, a lot of my emotions came out through through artwork. So I got
Right.
into art somewhere around middle school, where I was going through a lot of trouble mentally. Now I'm able to reflect and
Oh,
say, yeah, that was a lot of mental stuff already built up. Um, so when it came down to like journaling, what I can recall, I really didn't get into it until some issues that I was having, some stuff that I was battling with myself as far as depression and just issues that I had going on in my life at the time. This is sometime after high school. I was in a very dark place. I didn't know how life was going to improve from where it was. I Yeah, I wanted I wanted to end it at that time. That's where I was at that point. And the crazy thing is, I got into reading around that same time that I wasn't doing as much before. Because at the same time, there was still a will in me to try to improve myself. And one of the things, as far as I was like conversations we've already had, as far as like my taste and stuff. So um, people might know that I'm generally, a hip hop guy, but I got into a lot of Nirvana around that time. So Kurt Cobain's Journals, that book, I purchased it, and I was reading through a lot of all those journal entries, and around that same time, I decided to do the exact same thing, and that actually helps. It helps, especially because when even till like recent, I would say that journaling to me has always been to write down the negative things that's going on with me, right? Where I put all of that information onto paper and kind of have that moment of release where I can release these thoughts, I can release these, feelings of, that I haven't expressed because, like you said, who do I go to? I don't want to be a burden to nobody. I don't want to have to bring this conversation to somebody that's not ready to actually deal with it. So you just deal with it yourself, and then you don't have anybody to kind of vent to. So at that time, there was nobody. I felt there was nobody. That's how that was my internal feeling, right? That there was nobody that I
hmm
can turn to. So when I picked up the journal, I felt like my words were being released and somebody was hearing me out. And even if that person was me rereading that later on, it did help. It was part of my process of how I got past that stuff, because just to pick up that type of book later on and just read it, and then afterwards just kind of like you said, right, like you look at it from a different perspective, you read and you see what's been put in there, and you just wonder like, that's not the mindset I'm in anymore. And at that time you kind of realize that, living in the present moment, you realize that, okay, so if you just focus on the fact that you live in the present moment, any feelings that you might be having now are not eternal. They're not always going to be around. Things have a way of just getting better if you put work towards it. That's
Right.
all. If you put the motivation, if you put you back it up with some discipline, you can get out of it. There is willpower that people have where they're able to get out of the most fucked up situations in their life, and they have been
Yep.
able to get out of there and become someone way past the person that they were. and the potential that they had at the time that they were in those situations. So there is that happens out here in this reality where people are able to, come out of whatever holes that they're in and be able to reflect back and just see how far they can go. And that's at the point where I'm at now, where I look back and some of the things that I've seen recently, like on social media and stuff, with all the stuff that I come across now
Mm-hmm.
about would would your would your I would say maybe the person that was in those hard situations be proud of the person that you have become now. To
Right.
Are you now the person that they hoped that you would become? So that's the type of stuff that I'd live with like daily as well in my mind about, would 7-year-old me be proud of the person that I became? Would
Right.
14-year-old me be proud of the person that I became? Would 21-year-old me be proud of the person that I have become? I think that I would, because I have come from certain moments in my life where I felt like I'm a fucking failure. I I should be somewhere, way past where I'm at now. I should not be, dealing with this type of stuff, because I had I've talked about it already. I had a whole different perception of what my life should have been like at a certain age, where I should have already been, but I didn't put the work in because I never learned that process, because I thought all you have to do is just kind of put it out there and it'll happen. Somehow that didn't click, right? Somehow that didn't click. Like now it's like, what the fuck? How did you think that
Right.
was going to work out if you didn't put the work? There
Right.
is no way of getting things accomplished if you don't put in the fucking work. So
Yep.
yeah, it's obvious now. So yeah,
Yeah.
although it doesn't always have to be that way, because I've also done journaling recently, and I'm not in a depressive state of mind. um, I also see how, being even in a very positive state of mind, you can put down some valuable information that, if for me, I feel like just thoughts, ideas that are going on that I have, I feel that the best thing that I can probably do is write it down, because I'm always afraid that I'm gonna forget stuff. That I'm gonna forget some of these like really deep stuff that I come up with in my head. And I always think about, I have to make sure I write that down because I don't want to forget it. That's the type of stuff I don't want to forget. So there is times when I have to force myself like that, where I just tell myself that whatever that is that just came up right now in my head, I need to write that down. And it's been
Yep.
helpful. I mean, when I do come across and remember to do it. So I'm sure that as the end of this podcast, of this episode, I will resume journaling and continue and see how long I can go.
Right. And one of the, I don't know if I could identify whether it's extrinsic or intrinsic or external, internal motivators that helps me pick back up journaling when I fall off the journaling horse. Um, Obviously one of those is my anxiety, but at the same time, it's also, I think Mike and I talked about this within the last few weeks at work. One of the main reasons I journal is because if I am going to have a shorter life, and I realize that we could be taken out at any time, but we all hope for a little bit longer, right? So we can get those things done. But it's, if I do go and my kids don't have their dad, how could I still be there for them? And one of my intentions behind journaling is to leave a record of me working through these things maybe my problems are unique to me, but the problems in general, the obstacles that we face, are things that happen in everybody's lives. And so if my journaling could help them figure out how to be good human beings, good adults, that that would be for me the equivalent of still being a good dad, even though I might not be here physically. And so that is one of the main reasons why I um, continue to journal. I want to. It's almost like that chick flick. I think it's like a romantic movie. It's got Gerard Butler and I forget her face, but it's called like P.S. I Love You. And oh, spoiler alert. Yeah, spoiler alert, everybody, if you haven't seen that movie. Um, Dude gets cancer and passes away, and he finds a way to help her through getting over his loss. And it's this beautiful thing. And I realize some people, they're like, dude, you watch these rom-coms and these chick flicks, and you better believe it, man. I watch those. I
Well,
watch those.
when you have a wife that likes that type of stuff, yeah, you might be watching those type of movies.
Well, don't be quick to slay your opinion on that, because I'll watch them by myself, motherfucker. I'll watch them by myself. Yeah, when my wife comes out and the kids
Hey
are on the
man,
couch with
I
me.
watched the
What?
Notebook by myself, and I actually love that movie. That movie's awesome.
Good. Talking about yeah. That's because Mike's sitting next to his wife right now. So either way,
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
it's like my wife will come out of right. My wife will come out of the bedroom in the morning, and I got my boy sitting on the side, and she's like, "Oh, you guys are watching cartoons?" I'm like, "Yes, because he wanted to." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. It's because I love those cartoons too, and that's part of me being open-minded, and I think it's unique to me, maybe it's not, but because I realize that every day could be your last day, I don't care what somebody thinks about me watching these movies or these shows or whatever. It really doesn't matter. That I'm not gonna let those opinions affect my life. And people could say nerd or whatever. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because these things that you watch, they can be inspiring and or read about or listen to. It doesn't matter what it is. If those things, they do something for you and it's positive or helps you get to a positive state of mind, it doesn't matter. And like, so to relate it back to the PS I love you thing, it's if I can make a record to help my kids get through their life, even if I wasn't here, then finally, maybe then, after I'm dead, take record of this, y'all. After I'm dead, then I will accept that I have become a man. But only then. And if I die and that doesn't happen, then fucking I'm not a man. I died a boy. Okay? Everybody take note of that. Permanent record. Put it in my
Duly
file,
noted.
bitches. Yeah.
I said earlier that I wasn't going to use a quote tonight, but I changed my mind. So, and I used it last week, but I think it really applies to what we're talking about right now. And it's a quote that from Seneca: "Is life is very short and anxious for those who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear the future." And so, listening to you guys both talk about, especially, uh, Nate, you're talking about how you're anxious about, your lung disease and what the future might hold for you with that. And then Jay's talking about how, it will his 7-year self would he be proud of what he is today, right? Um, those, like, that's some really heavy stuff. And we do, like, I I've been through counseling. I've been through all this stuff for depression and anxiety, and every counselor I've ever been to uh, has told me, being anxious is being, you're worried about what's going to happen in the future, and being depressed is because you're you're worried about what has happened
Yep,
in the past.
without a doubt.
Um, being present in the moment uh, is the only cure. Like, you can take meds. I take meds. I take meds for depression and anxiety. But the one thing that helps me with all of it is staying present in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be the first to admit that I fall short of that, of staying in the moment and worrying about the future and worrying about the past, or and thinking about the past. But uh, we have to come back around, you know. And when Jay said, he asked the question, would his 7-year-old self be proud? I thought, would my 7-year-old self be proud of who I am today? And sadly, I'd have to say no. Like, I don't think my 7-year-old self would be proud of myself. And the only reason I say that is because all three of us come from a generation where boys weren't supposed to show emotion. We weren't supposed to uh, talk about our feelings. I grew up in a very rural area in Oregon. Grew up on a farm, and it was very much, doesn't matter if you're sick, tired, whatever, shut up and work. Right?
Right.
I don't care what you're feeling. I don't care what you're, any of that. Like, uh, and so that's at least in my childhood, it was so ingrained in me that when I express it and through journaling, like, it almost feels like I'm doing something wrong.
Right.
Right. And so the reason I say that my 7-year-old self wouldn't be proud of me is because at 7 years old, I was being told, don't the past and the future are the only thing that matters.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
So doing what I'm doing now with being involved with Stoicism, journaling, being mindful, going to counseling, all this stuff, my 7-year-old self would look at me and call me a pussy, pretty much, you know. Uh, but this is what is really being a man and growing up, right? Because if we go down that path to where we don't focus on the on the present, we won't have anything to leave
Right.
for our kids. We won't have a legacy through our journals to leave for our kids when we're gone. They won't know how to handle stuff, and that's why I was taught that, is because my family, my grandpa, my dad, they were all told the same thing
Right.
that they were telling me. And so just pushing yourself to be mindful in the moment. Um, you have to do it. Take second by second, and just focus on, how can I make this second the best
Yep.
second of my life.
I got something to add real quick.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm going to speak on the purpose of this tattoo that I got here, right? So that tattoo that I have there is a little kind of reminder of my sister-in-law who passed away in a car accident about 5 years ago. I'm going to try to keep this short because I might start crying.
Mm.
All right.
So, like you guys have mentioned about, what that legacy could be, or just when you pass away and people read your journals and you get to leave something behind, and people get to read it and get to kind of have a better understanding of where your mind was, or where your head or your thoughts were at, right? When my sister-in-law passed away, we all went through her stuff, kind of just looking to see what she had left behind. And she had a lot of journals. She definitely had a lot of, journal entries. She was into art. She did a lot of, sketchings and stuff like that. So a lot of that was stuff that, even to this day, we kind of just pull them out and we kind of go through them and look at them. And there is something in that, right? That you get to read something, and then if you know the person, you understand exactly what they were going through, or kind of, what their emotions were. This was a free spirited person who enjoyed life. If I can say somebody that I could have now seen as a reflection of, oh, that person was living present, that was her. you know she was
That's
definitely
awesome.
somebody that lived in the present, and obviously she journaled. So yeah, there is a big impact that journaling can do, especially if ever a moment like that comes. It's You leave something powerful behind, especially if you want to have that kind of memento to kind of
Mm-hmm.
just read and reflect back on that person. Those are always the good ones, especially a journal.
Yep. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And if you were like
For sure.
me or us, and you are struggling with a journal and to get started journaling, things like that, I have another quote. This one's from Timothy Leary, and it says, "To use your head, you have to go out of your mind. To use your head, you have to go out of your mind." I heard it a while back, and I've been trying to think of a good spot to use that quote. And today it just happened naturally. So I think that means something. And I think we've talked about it in all the other episodes. We talked about judgment and we talked about all of those different things. With journaling, for me, that is going out of my mind, because my mind, I've already explained it. My mind's calling me the little bitch. My mind is saying this and that. And that's why back in the day they had so many representations on each shoulder. There was an angel and there was a devil. And because that's your inner monologue. And you have to get past that. And that's why I love this quote from Timothy Leary. You have to go out of your mind. And if you need that physical representation of that, it's through journaling. You put what's in your mind on that journal, those emotions pass, you give it time, and now you can come back to it and you can evaluate it, review it, and move on. And move on. Yeah, I think it fit. I think I finally found a place for it.
And the thing too to remember also, like, good job. Your journal entries don't have to be novels,
Right.
right? It can be just today was good. Uh, Nate and I had a text exchange a couple weeks ago, or throughout the last couple of weeks. I mean, we text often, but um, Nate texted me one day and he's like, I wasn't very stoic today. And I wrote him, there's a big, long response, and told him, like, we wouldn't have the Stoics quotes if they didn't journal and all this stuff. Like, they were reflecting back on the mistakes they made, all yada, 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 all that good stuff. And Nate's like, damn, that's a good quote, or that's a good reply. And then this week, I respond to him and I said the same thing. I wasn't very stoic today. And then Nate's like, well, what are you going to do about it? And I'm like, well, that's a good question. And so I was like, well, I'm going to reflect and do better tomorrow. Right. And then he goes, sweet, that was it, right? So the whole point of that,
Very,
telling
very
that
Nate
story,
of him.
is that very Nate, right? But effective, right? It wasn't a big, long, meaningful thing, right? Doesn't mean that it had an impact, right? It forced me to think like, well, what the fuck am I going to do about it? Right. So I have to be better tomorrow. And so how am I going to get there? A very short statement for the same effect as my long response had, so it doesn't have to be a novel. It doesn't have to take all day.
Right.
I've even been walking with Nate at work, and he's like, oh, just a second, I got a journal. And so he'll go and like, I didn't journal this morning. So he'll go somewhere and journal, so it doesn't have to be long.
Right.
You're still an odd character, Nate. You're still an odd character.
Indeed, my friend. I think the beauty,
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think the beauty behind it now is, Mike was talking about his 7-year-old self would not like his current self. Me too. And that's just because I hated my own guts back then. That's why I had so many problems. I was not comfortable with who I am because I liked watching cartoons. I liked watching these quote unquote girl movies or whatever. And people, like, if I did tell somebody, even if they were my friend, they'd make fun of me. And today, like, for a while, I didn't, we already talked about I wasn't stoic from the beginning, right? And I used to watch all these like tier 1 guys and these manly men guys. And there's this guy, Pat McNamara, who also journals and watches birds and draws birds. But he has his own quote, and he says, if I were to clone myself today and my clone, just stayed here, and then would I be doing the things today to kick my own clone's ass tomorrow? And so, before, when I was a kid, I was this timid guy. And if you're thinking about like fight, flight, and freeze responses, I was a freeze character even into my 20s. And I wasn't happy with it. And so I turned myself into this manly man, but I pushed myself aside in doing it. And so it wasn't until I accepted who I was as a person that I now feel like, okay, like now I'm a manly man. I'm not saying I'm a man or I've arrived or anything like that, but I could, well, no, like
So,
I haven't
are you a
accomplished.
man or are you not a man?
No, like,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah. Don't worry, Nate. You reek of machismo.
yeah. It's the stash, right? No.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I need to step into a Slim Jim.
It is.
Yeah. That's how Pat McNamara talks too. So I need to use a different term. So not manly man or whatever.
Yeah.
But like quote unquote badass, right? Like somebody who's not going to take shit from anybody. Somebody who's not going to curl up into a ball and cry when they're being punched or something. And for a little while, I went too far in that direction, after wrestling, freaking got into boxing and jiu-jitsu. And then as soon as I got into that whole Fed security stuff, like I really started taking these classes to be like, quote unquote, one badass MFer. And the cockiness and arrogance came with it. And I just pushed people away in my life. And it wasn't until I was okay with myself that I started being able to retain friendship. And I lost some good people during that time. And there's no one to blame but myself.
Mm.
And so, now if I clone myself today, you better believe I'm going to kick my clone's ass tomorrow. And at the same time, when we're done, maybe we'll go watch fucking A Notebook or something. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's just, you got to be okay with your... you got to be okay with yourself. You know, it's just how it is, man. And I mean, like, so these guys know me. Mike knows me, not for as long as Jay
For
has,
sure.
but Mike's kind of seen who I am now, and at work, I can be a goon. I'm no longer a leader, so I get to do that. I'm trying to remember how to be a follower. I think I'm doing okay. I go overboard with jokes and stuff a little bit, but man, like when it's
You're
time to
doing
get
fantastic.
fantastic, thanks, Mike. Uh, but like when it's time to get stuff done, I'm sure you're able to see like I turn that off and I just handle the task. And the minute it's over, because I journal, because I'm okay with who I am, because I focus on being in the present, as soon as chaos is done, I'm right back to fucking messing with your shit, I'm gonna be like, hey, like let's go do this. Let's play a joke on somebody. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think some people like that because stressful situations they can be exhausting. Uh, but just one word of advice: as long as you can stay present in the moment,
Yeah.
there's still stressful situations. Don't get me wrong, but the minute they're done, if you're controlling your focus, your thoughts, they're not stressful because they're done, motherfucker. That's the whole point of being done. So get back after it. Freaking don't let those
Right.
things control you.
They're
Yep.
gone.
All right, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Any last thoughts before we put a wrap on this?
Only thing is that we learned some valuable information in this episode, and that's that Nate is a huge Nicholas Spark fan.
Yeah. Yep. Better believe it. Oh man, I hope my wife doesn't watch or listen to
There you
this
go.
because she's gonna be like, "Oh, so now we're gonna watch this." And like, don't get me wrong, I like those movies, but there's a couple of them like Sense and Sensibility or something rather. Man, I can't stand those movies. But,
Oh
yeah.
God.
Maybe one day. Maybe one day. Anyways. Yeah.
Maybe one day. Live in the moment,
That's right.
second by
That's right.
second.
We're watching too many documentaries over here to worry about that type of stuff.
Yeah. Oh man, I watch. Yeah.
That's right.
Watch it all. All right. Well, fellas, I think that's a wrap. I want to thank everybody for joining in on this episode for the Street Stoic podcast. Uh, we hope that you found our discussion on journaling and mindfulness helpful, also probably entertaining and informative. There's a little informative in there. Remember that journaling is a powerful tool and can cultivate self-awareness, resiliency, and even a positive mindset. It can help you become more mindful and introspective to align with Stoic principles such as living in the present moment and focusing on what is in our control. So, whether you're a seasoned journaler or just getting started, we encourage you to make journaling a regular part of your day, your morning, evening. It doesn't matter which, and then start getting into mindfulness. Even if it's not journaling, journaling helps with mindfulness. But if you are just one of those mindfulness people, it helps with the Stoicism practice or the Stoic practice rather. So try to set yourself aside some dedicated time and even space. Try to make sure that you're not getting distracted in either task, whether it be journaling or mindfulness, and choose a format that suits your needs. I think in this episode, we each talked about how we go about those things, and it looks different for each of us. So Use prompts, guided questions to start on your practice, and don't forget to share your experiences with other of us modern day Stoics in the community. We're all in this together. All right. And that's a wrap for me. Later.
Peace.
Later.